and then to proceed with this evening's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gary. So hi, everyone. For those of you who perhaps have not been on previous Better Health presentations, my name is Judith Antwi. I am a paediatric doctor by trade, but I really enjoy having the opportunity to speak to people about healthy lifestyle and well-being. I believe in holistic health, so this means our physical health, as well as our mental health and our emotional health and our spiritual health. I believe it's all in one, and therefore that is usually reflected when I present. So you'll hear things about your physical health, you'll hear spiritual things, you'll hear mental things, and also emotional aspects as well. So that's who I am, and I just hope that you all enjoy this evening's presentation. It's very short and it's also very simple, but I think it's really important. It's about sleep, really, and getting appropriate rest, because many of us are very busy, and we might be eating the right things and we might be getting the exercise that we need, and we might be drinking enough water, for example, but how many of us really and truly get the right amount of rest consistently? And I know that's a very difficult thing, but I'm hoping that we can just perhaps tonight just revise what we know about getting a good rest, and really more than that, but I'm hoping that we are actually encouraged to adopt these lifestyle behaviors into our daily lives, so that we can actually get the benefit from having adequate sleep and having adequate rest. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I'll proceed. Okay, so can you all see that? Can anyone see it?
Yes.
Yes, we're fine.
Fabulous. Okay, so here we go then. So I'm going to start with, you might wonder, why am I starting with a text from the Bible? But I think it sets a bit of a precedence to what we're speaking about. And I recognise that some of you out there may or may not be familiar with the Bible, or have read it, or even like it. But there is a reason why I share this slide first. So it's to do with creation, and it's to do with the creation of the first day. And this is what is recorded in the ancient text. And it says, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, some of you may be familiar with this and others may not be, but basically what we're seeing in this text here is the creation of the first day. And it says that he created the light he called day, and the darkness which he called night, and this was done on the first day. So the first thing that was made was the day and night. And actually this day and night was a cycle, because we passed from night to day, that was the first day, and then we passed from the next night to the next day, that was the second day, etc., etc. And we have that daily cyclical time period, which is called day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way up to day 7. So the first thing that was established in this earth was a 24-hour cycle of day and night, light and dark. And it's interesting that the reason why I start with that is because there are things in which govern our physiological functions, or our bodily functions, and this day and night cycle is something that is really integral to our health and integral to our physiological bodily functions. And these 24-hour cycles are known as circadian rhythms. And as the slide says, it says for daily physiological cycle, the sun or the light and dark cycle sets the rhythm for our cycles. And therefore, it is important to have a regular time to wake up, a regular time to eat, a regular time to sleep in order to maintain this rhythm and keep our bodies in sync. And amazingly, our creator made this light and dark cycle on the first day for us. So what this basically is saying is that all types of functions in our body, for example, when you have the highest temperature, when you have the lowest temperature, control of changes in your blood pressure, control of appetite, when you're expecting to receive food, when you're actually going to feel hungry, when you're going to feel full. Just ask perhaps if we can turn off our mics, if that's okay. Thank you so much. Can we do that, please? Fabulous. Thank you so much. So all of these functions, they are determined by the light and dark. They are determined by these 24-hour rhythms. And it's just basically shown a little bit in a schematic way here. So it's saying that you have a high alertness level at about 10 a.m., that you may experience a likely bowel movement at 8:30 a.m. And there's other things like you have your greatest cardiovascular efficiency. That's over here. If you can see my cursor, that is at about 5 p.m. You might experience your highest blood pressure about 6:30 p.m. and have the highest body temperature at 7 p.m. and you experience your deepest sleep at 2 a.m. So all of these different things, they're all controlled by a 24-hour light and dark, day and night, as a thing which sets the rhythm of our bodies. And if we want to keep all of these things in sync, it's really imperative that we sleep enough and also that we sleep at the right time each day and at the same time each day. Our bodies really need to function on patterns which really are the same. So it's really wanting routine. If you want to get the best out of your body is crying out for routine. So it's crying out to sleep at the same time, to eat at the same time, to wake up at the same time. And this is very, very, very difficult. But the closer that we can get to it, the more optimum our bodies and our minds will work. Now, these time periods here, don't get me wrong, this is just an example. You know, don't feel a little bit worried if you don't have a bowel movement at 8:30 or you have your highest testosterone level at 9 o'clock. It will be slightly different for different people depending on when they're sleeping and when they're waking. But generally, if we keep things as much the same as possible, if we can try to order our lives so that we can live that way, then we can expect different physiological functions like these to happen the same and to happen maximally and optimally each day. So, as I said to you, light and dark and being asleep and being awake, these are things which set our circadian rhythms. They set our 24-hour bodily cycles. But what actually is sleep? What is it? So sleep is kind of like a state of unconsciousness. It is a state of unconsciousness because you're not actually conscious of the things that are going on around you. So it is a type of unconsciousness. And in this type of unconsciousness, the brain is relatively unresponsive to external stimuli or the things that are going on around us compared to the internal stimuli. However, this type of unconsciousness is quite specific because it is different to other states of unconsciousness. For example, a coma is different to that because sleep, this type of unconsciousness, it follows a very predictable cycle. So even our sleep follows a cycle. And in this cycle, what happens is the unresponsive state can actually be reversed by external stimuli. So this unresponsive state is not continuous, and it doesn't last forever. This unresponsive state will predictably end. And this is why it is a cycle, because you enter into a state of unconsciousness, and then it is followed, or it cycles with, a state of consciousness. And so our sleep also follows a cycle. We're very cyclical beings. So the next question is, well, what actually happens during sleep? What happens in our brains during sleep? Now, this is really, really simplified, because sleep and sleep physiology is like really complicated. I have a friend of mine who works down at the Evelina Hospital in London, and she's a sleep specialist, actually for children. But sleep is really complicated, and I'm just really trying to simplify the concept for us. But basically, during sleep, what will happen is the anterior and lateral aspects of our hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is a part of the brain which is really important for control of many hormonal functions in the body. It's really important for that. And people who have problems with their hypothalamus have a vast array of issues which really need significant input from endocrinologists and other different types of doctors. But your hypothalamus is a really important area of your brain. And basically the front of it, that's the anterior part, and the side of the hypothalamus, this part of the brain, it actually starts doing things which will inhibit or shut down the functions of other parts of the brain that normally respond to external stimuli. So for example, the occipital part of the brain, that responds to visual stimuli. So you see something, the message goes in through your eyes, it affects your optic nerve, and that will eventually go through lots of different channels to get to your occipital lobe, which is the back part of your brain. And that occipital lobe will make sense of what your eyes have seen. But you need to be awake, and you need to be alert, and you need to have good vision to be able to do this. And so this process would be something that the hypothalamus would start to stop, if you get what I mean, in order for the brain to start shutting down so that it can switch off, if you like, and it can go into a state of sleep and enter into that unconsciousness that we were talking about. So I'll just explain that again. An area of the brain called the hypothalamus, it starts to stop brain functions that would normally respond to external stimuli. And if the brain is being stopped, it's going to start to shut down so that it can get into a position where it's ready to rest and enter into a state of sleep. So then when the brain actually has shut down and we enter into that sleep state, we enter into that state of unconsciousness. The sleep that we experience, or that unconscious state, that in itself actually follows some cycles. So as I said before, we're very cyclical beings. So what happens is when you first fall asleep, and when I first fall asleep, we enter into a state of what we call non-rapid eye movement sleep. A non-rapid eye movement sleep is the deepest state of sleep that you can have. And so, you are very unconscious to the external world, what's going on around you, and you're just dead to the world, as they say. So that period of sleep, it lasts, it may last about 90 minutes or longer. But then when that non-rapid eye movement sleep, it eventually comes to an end, and it cycles with another phase of sleep, which is called rapid eye movement sleep. So rapid eye movement sleep, as it's intimated in the word, your eyes actually do move rapidly, and the level of unconsciousness is different, because this is where dreaming occurs. And so the brain actually is quite active during this period of sleep. But the first rapid eye movement sleep that you will experience in a night will be a short one. It will be a short one. So you have a long, non-rapid eye movement sleep where you have deep sleep, and then it cycles with a short, rapid eye movement sleep. And then you have the second phase where you have another rapid eye movement section of sleep, but it will be a little bit less than the first one. And then you go to a rapid eye movement phase of sleep, and then you have the final third of your sleep where you have the longest period of rapid eye movement sleep, and a very short period of non-rapid eye movement sleep. So our sleep is basically split up into thirds. So the first third, non-rapid eye movement sleep, a deep sleep, that's what happens first, and you have a small rapid eye movement sleep. Then another non-rapid eye, short, slightly longer than the first one, rapid eye, and then you have your final non-rapid eye movement sleep and the final rapid eye movement sleep. Now I've laboured that a little bit, but it's just to say this, that as you go from the beginning of your sleep to the end of your sleep, you go from a period of very deep sleep where you're experiencing more of non-rapid eye movement sleep, and through those cycles of sleep that you get through the night, you end up with sleep which is not so deep as you're beginning to wake up. So at the end of the night, just as you're beginning to wake up, your final cycle of sleep will be a rapid eye movement sleep, and it will be a longer one. And this is where, as I said before, you'll get dreaming. And this is often why when you wake up in the morning, you sometimes have very vivid dreams and you remember them. Sometimes they're so vivid, you think actually it was real, and you're like, really? Was I really on Mars? Did that happen? No, I was actually asleep. I was actually dreaming. And that's because you ended your last phase of sleep with rapid eye movement sleep where dreaming occurred. So the deepest sleep occurs first and the less deep sleep occurs last, basically. So that's what happens to us when we sleep. And also when we sleep, as I said before, that the beginning of our sleep is the deepest sleep. And one of the reasons why the beginning of our sleep is the very deepest sleep is because we start to release a hormone from a different part of our brain called the pineal gland, and that hormone is called melatonin. Now, many of you have heard of this hormone, melatonin. Some of you may have actually bought a synthetic version of this melatonin, perhaps if you've traveled and you've experienced jet lag and you don't want to feel so tired all the time, so you take some melatonin. And others of you may have experienced melatonin because maybe you have a child who has some issues, perhaps with ADHD or another developmental problem, and they struggle to sleep, and therefore the doctor has prescribed them, or a community pediatrician has prescribed them melatonin. You may have come across it in those contexts, but melatonin is a hormone that is naturally released by our brains. And it's really hugely important for having a restful sleep. Now, just as many of our other bodily functions, and melatonin has its requirements, and if you want to get the most out of your melatonin, you need to kind of like obey melatonin's requirements. There's certain conditions that need to exist for this melatonin to be released and for us to get the restful sleep that we are looking for. So one thing that I will tell you about melatonin is it is released from the brain in response to darkness. So the environment needs to be very dark for us to have this melatonin secreted into the brain. However, melatonin actually is made from various precursors, meaning that there's another chemical, or there's another hormone, or there's other substrates that then make melatonin. And so melatonin actually is produced from a different hormone called serotonin. And serotonin, and many of you who've heard this talk before, or have you heard me speak about going to bed on time, serotonin really is our happy hormone. So serotonin is a hormone that helps us to improve our mood, helps us to improve our concentration. And actually serotonin is the hormone that antidepressants are trying to boost. So when you get these antidepressants, many of them are called selective SSRIs, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And basically all that means is that these drugs like fluoxetine and paroxetine, these various antidepressants, they're trying to keep the serotonin levels high in your brain. And this is what the doctors are prescribing for depression. But the good news is that you can boost your own serotonin levels, again, if we kind of obey the conditions that serotonin requires. So what are those conditions? Well, the condition is that we need daylight to make serotonin. So serotonin production will be highest during our exposure to bright light. And this is why I'm always trying to advocate for people, if possible, wherever possible, to try and do your exercise outside. Do it outside in the daylight, because if you do it in the daylight, you'll be exposing yourself to bright light. It's much brighter light outside. Even on an overcast day, it's brighter outside than it's going to be in your house, unless you have a one of those lamps that give really bright light therapy. But most of us don't possess those. So the next best thing, which is a natural thing, is to actually be outside. So we need this serotonin to make melatonin. And serotonin actually is made from a amino acid. An amino acid basically is a building block for proteins. So it's made from an amino acid called tryptophan. And tryptophan is something that we can actually get from our diets. So what I'm saying to us is that if we're eating the right things and we're exposing ourselves to enough daylight at the right time, we will then convert that tryptophan into serotonin, the tryptophan that we eat into serotonin during the daytime. And then at night, as long as we're in a dark and a favorable environment, that serotonin will then be converted. It will be converted to melatonin during the dark. And then we will experience a very restful sleep. So I'm really hoping that that was not too convoluted. If it was, obviously, just write down in the chat and I can explain it again. But the bottom line is we need to eat foods, and I'll be telling you in a minute what foods contain tryptophan, but we need to eat foods that contain tryptophan. That tryptophan during the daylight will be changed to serotonin, and then it will be converted to melatonin at night. So when is this melatonin released? Well, it's usually released at about 9 o'clock-ish, especially if it's dark at 9 o'clock. There are some places in the world where very northern latitudes in Europe, like Scandinavia, where in the summer it is never dark really. Even at 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock midnight, there is some kind of light there. And then in the winter, it is always dark. And this is quite a challenging thing for the people that live up there, because it really does mess with their circadian rhythms. But in places which are perhaps not so such a northern latitude, generally we find that melatonin will begin to be secreted at about 9 p.m. And this melatonin is really important. I'll just go to this graph. So gets to about, so you can see my graph here. So this axis at the bottom is the time of day. And this axis that's going vertically is how much melatonin we're producing. So as you can see, during the daytime, when you've got probably the brightest light, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, etc., the levels are quite low, but you can see perhaps around about here, so that would probably be about 9 o'clock, it starts to rise and rise and rise, and then you've probably got to about 10 or 11, it rises quite sharply, and it will stay at a peak for a couple of hours, and then it will have a really rapid drop down. And the point is that this period of time that's represented under the graph, that period of time basically corresponds to the amount of melatonin that you're going to be exposed to. Now, if you go to bed here at about 9 o'clock, then you can see that your brain is going to be exposed to lots of melatonin because you're going to have a big area underneath this graph. You've maximized the amount of time you have exposed your brain to melatonin if you go to bed at 9 o'clock. But now let's say if you go to bed at about 12 o'clock, so you go about here, or even 1, you can see that you are going to cut the area under that graph probably by half, and you're not going to have as much melatonin exposure if you go to bed later, because whatever time you go to bed, whether you go to bed early or late, it's going to start decreasing quite rapidly in the early hours of the morning. From about 3, 4 o'clock, it's going to decrease really rapidly. So you get the most out of your melatonin if you go to bed earlier. And this is why that wise person said, early to bed and early to rise keeps a person healthy, wealthy, and wise. And as I said before, I'm not sure about the wealthy bit, but certainly healthy and wise, because if you want to have wisdom, if you want to have good brain function, you need, and I need, to have adequate sleep. And I am talking to myself because I know that I work shifts in a hospital and I often don't get to bed on time. And then what happens? We get Asda and Tesco bags underneath our eyes. But more importantly than that is that, you know, we don't have the best brain function when we haven't slept. And you think about it yourself. Have you made the wisest decisions when you were tired? I know I haven't. And also think about it. When you're feeling sad about something or something stressing you out, is it better or is it worse when you're tired? Again, I know for me, if I'm upset about something or if I'm feeling a little bit irrational, it's going to be even worse if I'm tired. And I'm pretty sure that that's probably not just that's not exclusive to me. I suspect that a few of you can possibly resonate with that. And so it's really important, you know, for our well-being that we're getting enough melatonin, so that we're getting enough rest, and that we can wake up feeling refreshed and rejuvenated, so that we can face the day's challenges, especially the decisions that we have to make, and some of them are tough ones, and the resilience that we're going to need to face that day. So the bottom line is, if you go to bed earlier, if you can go to bed around about the time when the melatonin starts to be released and you can be sleeping, then you're going to get the most exposure to melatonin, and you're going to have the most restful sleep. But I'm just going to go back a few slides, because as I said before, that melatonin has some precursors, meaning that there are things that melatonin is made from. And as I said to you before, it's made from a hormone called serotonin. And that hormone serotonin in turn is made from tryptophan. And tryptophan is an amino acid that you can eat. And so there are lots of sources of tryptophan, and some of those sources are healthier than others. So some of those sources are they come from plants, and some of those sources come from animal foods. Now, it is recommended that we should have about 250 to 450 milligrams of tryptophan per day. That's just for general for adults. It's probably perhaps a little bit less for children. So you want to be, trying to eat, and I want to be trying to eat as much as close to this amount as possible, so that we can make that serotonin, we can make that melatonin. So here are some plant-based sources of tryptophan and a non-plant-based source. So we've been told that cheese and whole milk and things like that, contain a lot of tryptophan. But if we actually compare the amount of tryptophan in terms of milligrams per 100 grams, or in the case of milk, it would be milligrams per 100 mils, there's only 46 milligrams in 100 mils of milk. But if we compare that to some of the higher sources like tofu and roasted pumpkin seeds and gluten flour and sesame seeds, we can see that actually there is much more per unit of quantity in these plant foods than in whole milk. And also you'll find that these plant foods not only contain a lot of tryptophan, but they'll also contain other things that whole milk doesn't contain, like fiber, for example. Obviously pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds and almonds and walnuts, they'll also contain healthy fats. Black walnuts contain omega-3 fats, which are really important for our brain. They're important for our concentration. Omega-3 fats are important for your mood as well. So depression is a very, very real thing. And especially during the lockdown, we have found that so many people, unfortunately, have struggled with depression and anxiety. And these are not just adults, but they're children as well. As I said to you before, I am a paediatric registrar, and the Royal College of Paediatricians and Child Health have sent us information to say that various mental health problems in children has drastically gone worse since this time last year because of the lockdown. One of them being anorexia. It's a real problem, and it has not been an uncommon thing, unfortunately, for us to have children, some of them as young as 12, suffering with anorexia, suffering with suicidal thoughts, suicidal intentions. I do apologize if you can hear that knocking. I think that's my neighbor upstairs. Sorry about that. But yeah, so depression is a real thing, and so we need to be doing all that we can to be kind to ourselves and to give our brains the foods that our brains need to give us a restful sleep, and also to decrease our risk of depression. Now, some people, and I know I've gone slightly off target a little bit here, but I just mention it because it's so important, and it's so common. It is also very stigmatized, which I don't understand why, because there's 26 of us on the line now, and I bet all of us either have experienced depression or know somebody who has experienced it, or know somebody who knows somebody who's experienced it, because it's that common. So I digressed, but I'll go back to sleep. So eating enough tryptophan will help us to make serotonin. And so tofu, I believe Kathleen was on the line, she was on the line a few weeks ago, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, and she taught us how to make those delicious tofu burgers, and I am really looking forward to making them, and that is a good source, and all of these other things. So please take a picture of that or whatever, and try to incorporate more of these types of foods into your diet. So we've spoken about that. Okay, so as I said, melatonin is really important for a restful sleep, but as with plant-based foods, melatonin doesn't just do one function, it has many other functions. And it's the same with plant-based foods. So if I just go back, if I just go back to this list, these foods don't only contain tryptophan, but they contain many other healthy nutrients in the whole food. And this is why we're really trying to push people to consider and to engage in eating whole food. And whole food is really powerful because it contains many good things in one food. Whereas if you just take, so for example, if you take roasted pumpkin seeds, that probably, I'm not entirely sure what the vitamin E content is in pumpkin seeds, but it probably does contain some vitamin E. However, if you take just single vitamin E vitamin tablets, you're only going to get vitamin E. But if you eat the whole food, you get vitamin E, you get other vitamins, you get fats, you get proteins, you get fiber, you get all this good stuff. And that is the power of whole food rather than supplements, which are very singular in nature. So just going back to melatonin, melatonin doesn't just do one thing, it does many things. And so we'll look at the list now really quickly about the other great functions of melatonin. So it treats jet lag. And this is really important. I know no one's really probably been traveling anywhere during lockdown, but perhaps in previous times you have, and perhaps in the future you will. But melatonin is really important for getting over that tiredness when we've gone, especially long haul flights. But the other thing is that melatonin is a powerful, really powerful antioxidant. And I explained to you before that antioxidants are really important for correct cell function. And when our cells don't function correctly, especially if that part of the cell that's not functioning correctly is the genetic material, then this is how things can go wrong and cells can become cancerous. And if the cells that are not working properly are our immune system, cells of our immune system, especially our natural killer cells, this is where the cancers or the cancerous cells can become completely chaotic and grow and grow and grow until we actually have the disease. Now, all of us, at probably all times, our cells become cancerous. Something happens in genetic material and it starts dividing. But what happens is our immune system will release these natural killer cells, these white blood cells, which will see that, that cell there, that cell's gone a bit haywire, it's gone wrong. I'm going to destroy that cell so that it can't grow into a cancer. It can't become the actual disease, even though the small process, the microscopic processes have already started to happen. And that's why we have to have important immune systems. And if we are not sleeping properly, if we are not having proper melatonin function, then we are not exposing ourselves to the antioxidant properties of melatonin, meaning that our cells are not going to function properly. And if the cells that are not functioning properly are your immune system cells, it is going to be bad for us. And we are going to increase our risk of many diseases. And this is another reason why people who work shifts, who work nights and who work days, we really are, literally taking time off our lives because we are not, for one of the reasons is that we are not exposing ourselves to melatonin as we should be, and we're not having that sameness that the body wants for sleeping at the same time and sleeping during the darkness. Unfortunately, we're not experiencing that, and our cells are put under pressure, and unfortunately we are going to reap the rewards, the unfortunate rewards of not having enough melatonin and not following the daily regularity of our actions that the body really, really needs. So because melatonin is an antioxidant, it helps us to remain youthful and helps to boost our immunity. And as I said, this immunity thing is really, really, really important. It's absolutely vital. And I remember when I was at medical school and I was a terrible student, I'm really sorry that I have to hold my hands up. I was a really bad student and I used to do everything last minute. And I used to not sleep great, like many other students don't do. And, you get through the exams by the grace of God, you'd get through, but then surely I would get a cold after. I'd get a cold or a flu because why? I wasn't sleeping and I was under a lot of stress. So, and one of the problems, not enough melatonin. So this is a real thing, and we can overcome it by making sure we get to bed on time. And I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to all of us who are on this platform. So, as I said before, melatonin, it helps to prevent depression, but it has these other functions as well. So look at this, it helps to lower cholesterol, and it helps to maintain correct and good blood pressure, and also helps to avoid heart rhythm problems, which are known in the medical terms as arrhythmias. So melatonin is really important, but as you can see at the bottom, it says that we should perhaps avoid natural melatonin supplements. And why do I say that? So, as I said to you before, melatonin is produced in the brain of mammals. It's produced in our brains as humans, and it's produced in other mammals' brains. And if you're taking melatonin as a supplement, like you're taking it as a tablet, and you're taking a natural melatonin, then invariably, the fact that it's a natural substance means that you're getting it, I guess, from source. And if you're getting it from source somewhere along that line, you're actually going to be eating something that was produced in another animal's brain. And that perhaps is probably not the best thing to do, because remember that certain animals, they do harbor the brain tissues and the nervous tissue can harbor viruses and prions and different things which can cause severe illness in humans. So you remember back in the 80s, we had that, was it the 80s or the early 90s, we had BSE, which is mad cow disease. That is caused by a prion in cows, and it was getting into the human chain. Why? Because somehow humans were eating the offal, the nervous tissue of cows. So we really don't, or should I say, the cows were eating the nervous tissue of other animals that were the harbingers of this prion, and then it went into the human chains because we were eating those cows. But needless to say, the reason why this disease happens is because there was consumption of nervous tissue, and we're not really supposed to be eating the nervous tissue of any animals. Animals shouldn't do it, and humans shouldn't do it. So it's just really a point of caution to say that if you are going to take melatonin, which I wouldn't advise that you take melatonin as a tablet anyway, I would advise that we can try to get our habits, our lifestyle habits, in a way where we're boosting our own melatonin so that we don't have to take it from an external source. But if you are going to take melatonin, I would avoid taking a natural melatonin because of the risk that maybe it does contain nervous tissue from another animal and the problems that may incur on you. If you are going to take melatonin, then I would take a synthetically produced one. Okay, so we're moving on quickly. So we've spoken a little bit about melatonin, and the fact that that gives us a very restful sleep. But what happens when we don't get a restful sleep, or we don't get enough sleep, and then we come in a state where we're actually sleep deprived? What actually happens? Well, lots of things can happen, and a lot of them are not good. So on our list here, it says our higher order cognitive tasks are impaired in terms of speed and accuracy. So something like driving, that is impaired, but also other cognitive tasks would be things like judgment, planning, reasoning, making difficult decisions. All of these are higher order cognitive tasks. And when we don't sleep enough, it's difficult for us to do these things, as what I alluded to before, if you have to make a very, very difficult decision, or if you've got to take a really tough exam, or you've got to write a very complicated paper, or understand very difficult concepts, it's going to be harder for you and I to do this when we are sleep deprived. So it's really important that we try to avoid getting into this sleep deprivation. And if we are in that situation, which I feel a little bit like that right now, it needs to be addressed and reversed. So your problem solving is impaired, your judgment is impaired, and risky behavior is increased. So things that you probably wouldn't do because you'd be like, oh, that's perhaps not sensible. Things that you wouldn't do when you're not tired, you probably do when you're tired. And also things that you would perhaps not say. Sometimes we can get really snappy when we're tired. And then we regret it, don't we? Because we just said something that we probably didn't really mean, or we probably didn't want to say, and we've said it, and then we feel really daft because we've done that because of tiredness. So you know, we can kind of overcome some of these things by managing our sleep better. So as I said before, we have problems with driving when it comes to being tired, or we can, because it can impair your visual perception, and you can have peripheral visual neglect. So we all have that blind spot that's somewhere, I think mine's about here. Yeah, we all have that blind spot, but we can see what's going on in the peripheries, apart from those areas on each side where there is a blind spot. But you will neglect that peripheral vision more when you're tired, and that peripheral vision is really important for many things, but as I said, driving is one of them. Also, people who don't sleep properly are at higher risk of obesity, and I don't have enough time tonight to go into all of the problems, the health problems that are associated with being obese, but there are lots. Needless to say, having severe COVID-19 is one of them, but you know, increased risk of various cancers, increased risk itself actually of obstructive sleep apnea, which also is a very problematic thing to get a good sleep. If you have a lot of obesity and excess fat around the neck. So obesity and sleep deprivation, unfortunately, they can go hand in hand, and we want to try to avoid both. And then this one is interesting, poor regulation of blood sugar. So I have a very, very, very close friend who said to me, you know, I've been struggling a little bit in this area, and unfortunately he spends a lot of time awake at night, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why it happens. So I think, you know, it is definitely a real thing to have dysregulation of blood sugar if we are sleep deprived, which means that our risk of developing type 2 diabetes is increased. So we really want to avoid this whole sleep deprivation. And as I look at this, I'm looking at myself and I think, I really have got to get this sleep thing under control so that I can decrease my risk of all of these problems. And again, this is just a bit of encouragement for you. Again, and it comes from the Bible, and you may or may not be familiar with this, but in the book of Psalms, chapter 127, verse 2, it says, it's vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he, that means God, gives his beloved sleep. And if you think about all of these problems that you can have because of sleep deprivation, then it is true. It really is vain to continue living in this sleep deprived state. It's not helping us mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. And the Bible is saying that God actually wants us to rest. So I'm hoping that we will all, you know, take heed of that, I guess, and, you know, try as much as possible to get a better rest. So we've not got long now before we come to the end. But the next few slides really are about how we can get a better sleep. So you may have heard, I heard a term called sleep aerobics, and I'm thinking, how can I be doing aerobics and sleeping? But I think basically what they're trying to say is things that we should do habitually, that an exercise that we should do, or behavior that we should do regularly to help our sleep both now and in the long run. So that is what sleep aerobics is. I've called it sleep aids. You can call it what you want, as long as we're engaging in this type of lifestyle. So the first thing, which I've spoken about before, is daily exposure to bright light, at least 30 minutes per day. So and so this is why I'm saying that if you can do your exercise outside in the daylight, you're going to be exposing yourself to that bright light, and you're going to be converting your tryptophan into serotonin, which will then convert into melatonin, and which will then your brain will secrete from 9 p.m. till about 3 a.m. so that you can get that restful sleep. And, you know, if you do have to work night shifts, then there are these light boxes. Sometimes they're called seasonal affective disorder, SAD light boxes. And you can set the setting on them. And if you're getting, I think it's 20,000 lux, that's the setting, that's the intensity of light for 30 minutes a day, then you will be exposing yourself to a bright light. And just as an add-on, there are certain places, and I think in Scandinavia, I told you before, that there are times of the year where you don't get daylight at all during winter. There's high levels of depression, and they are using light therapy, 30 minutes daily of bright light from a light box, to help people get enough serotonin. They're doing it to help their depression, but actually, if they have more serotonin, then they will also produce more melatonin, so they can also get a restful sleep. So daily bright light is really important. Then the other thing is daily aerobic exercise. Now, even if you can't do it outdoors, it's really important to do aerobic exercise if you want to sleep well, because actually, for some reason, vigorous exercise, especially in the daylight, but even if it's not in the daylight, helps to bring on more restful sleep. And I'm not even sure the mechanisms completely about how that happens, but if you are struggling with insomnia and you're not doing aerobic exercise daily, then perhaps you would want to actually start getting yourself on an exercise program of walking, jogging, swimming, running, Zumba, whatever it is that you want to do, so that your heart rate is pumping and that you're breathing deeply, you're getting enough oxygenation. And this aerobic exercise is going to help you to sleep better later on in the evening. Now, just one thing to say, that you don't want to be doing this aerobic exercise just before you go to bed, because aerobic exercise is actually going to increase your level of alertness. And actually, we want to be kind of like sort of having a period where we can just calm down a little bit before we go to sleep. So you don't want to be doing, if you're going to bed at 10 o'clock or 9:30, you don't want to be doing your strenuous aerobic exercise at 8:30. You probably want to try and do it a bit earlier on in the day, or earlier on in the evening, or preferably even in the morning, first thing, if you can, if you want to get a good sleep. Okay. And some of us are experiencing late afternoon, or some of us are experiencing early, unwanted early morning awakening, meaning that you've fallen asleep, but actually you've woken up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and you're struggling to get back to sleep, and you're tossing, you're turning in bed. This can actually be a sign of depression. So, you know, you have to watch that if that is something that's happening to you. For some people, it's not a sign of depression. It's just a cycle that they're in. And what some researchers have found is that if you are experiencing that, sometimes doing your exercise in the late afternoon or early evening, so maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, that sometimes can help to combat unwanted early morning awakening. Okay, so just a couple more slides, how to get a better sleep. So this other thing now is really to do with what we're eating. So the bottom line is, to get the most restful sleep, our bodies need to have an empty stomach, basically. That's the bottom line of it. So eating late really messes up our melatonin. And the brain releases melatonin, that is true. But also our stomach can release melatonin as well. And if there is the presence of food in our stomach, especially a lot of food in our stomach, because we have had a big meal before we go to sleep, our stomach is not going to release the melatonin that it wants to release. That's the first thing. But the second problem is that melatonin release is also, or secretion is also inhibited by insulin. So if you eat something late at night, and that thing is a carbohydrate, especially if it's something that contains a lot of simple carbohydrates, so for example, ice cream or biscuits or a piece of cake or anything like that, you're going to have a surge in insulin, because that insulin is going to try to deal with the sugar that your body has been exposed to. And unfortunately, insulin surges cause the brain to decrease the release of melatonin. And so this is why eating late in the evening is not going to be good for sleep, because of impaired melatonin release, and especially eating sugary things late in the evening is not going to be good for sleep. So the best thing to do really is to try to have an empty stomach, which means eating the last meal earlier. And I really struggle with this as well. I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I really struggle. But if it takes, let's say, it takes the body 4 to 6 hours for the stomach to empty, depending on what you've eaten. If you eat something which is a high fat content, it takes longer. So if you've just eaten fish and chips, that is not going to be out of your stomach in 4 hours, especially if you had a big portion. It's probably going to be 5, 6, maybe 7 hours to release, to get the stomach empty. So if you're going to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, you probably want to try to eat the last meal by 4, 5, 6, probably at the latest. And you want to be not eating really fatty foods, not eating really sugary foods. And if you are going to eat the smallest amount at that time. And as they say, you should eat, there's another saying, isn't it? Eat breakfast like a king, and your lunch like a prince, and your dinner, or in Yorkshire, in Huddersfield, we call it your tea, have your dinner as a pauper. Meaning that the smallest amount and the very most humblest food really should be eaten later on in the day, so that you can get a better sleep for these reasons that I've just said. And some people will say, well, how am I going to eat breakfast like a king? Well, maybe that big massive meal that you were going to eat at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, have it for breakfast time. There's nothing wrong with having rice and peas at breakfast. There's nothing wrong at all. Culturally, we've said it's got to be 1 Weetabix and, I don't know, toast and I don't know, whatever else people eat at breakfast time. But have the most substantial meal earlier, especially if you're on a normal day routine. If you have the largest meal and the most substantial meal in the morning, you're awake and you're moving around and you're doing your exercise and you're doing all of this, you're going to burn those calories. But actually, if you eat the least substantial meal in the morning and then you eat the most substantial meal in the evening, you're not going to sleep. You're going to probably gain weight, and you're probably going to feel full in the morning, so that you don't feel like eating breakfast, which you actually need. Another different topic, the importance of eating an adequate breakfast, but it's absolutely important. And for those of us who may be struggling with obesity, I will just stress the point that anyone who has obesity should be eating a substantial breakfast. I know these diet programs will probably say eat less, but I'm actually telling you to eat more at breakfast time if you struggle with obesity. But that obviously is eating more at breakfast time of the right foods, but that's a separate issue. Early supper or no supper at all. That's going to be the best thing for us to do. So I can't stress that enough, but have most of your food earlier on in the day if you want to sleep better at night. And then it goes without saying to avoid caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol, because all of these things decrease melatonin. I know alcohol is a depressant, and people say that they need alcohol to help them to fall asleep. But actually, it is actually going to decrease, you will fall asleep, but it's actually going to decrease your melatonin production. And so that means the quality of your sleep is not going to be great. Caffeine, you know, if you are somebody who drinks, who takes in caffeine, you want to be not having it definitely after 12 o'clock, definitely not after 4 o'clock. I know there are a few people who will say, I can still sleep well even if I have caffeine at whatever time, but that is the exception rather than the rule. Most people who have caffeine later on during the day are going to suffer with the insomnia effects that it creates at night. So you really want to be avoiding that. As I've said before, you want to sleep before midnight, and you want to sleep in a dark, quiet, well-organized room. So as I said before, we need to be, we want our brain to be melatonin. And melatonin is released during the dark. It's released during the dark. So if your lights are on, like all my lights are on, even though your eyes are closed, the light is still going to go through your eyelids. And if it goes through your eyelids, it'll go through your pupil and it will hit the back of the eye called the retina, where the optic nerve is. And when it hits that, that is going to stimulate your brain, which you're trying actually to shut down because you want to sleep. So we really should not be sleeping in light. We need to be sleeping in the dark. And there are these eye shields, the eye shields or face masks, the ones that you put over your eyes that you can use to make it dark, or you can get blackout blinds to try to make the room darker. And if you've just watched some horror film or something which is then making you feel scared to turn all the lights off, please cease to watch those things. Don't put stuff in your mind that is going to make you get scared of the dark. And yes, I am speaking to adults, because I know some adults who are kind of scared to sleep in the dark, unfortunately. So, you know, you want to be able to be at one with being in the dark, because actually what was there when the light was on is still there when you turn the light off. It's not changed. The only thing that's changed is in your mind. So sleep in the dark. And again, the brain wants to calm down. If the room is well organized, then the brain's not really rushing around looking at all the chaos in the room. It's in a quiet, calm environment, and this will induce sleep more easily. And so this also means like not being on the phone or your iPad or playing computer games before you go to sleep, not reading when you're falling asleep with the light on and then falling asleep, because that is not going to give you the best sleep. And just as the light can stimulate our brain, noises can also stimulate our brain as well. And I promise I'm going to finish in the next 5 minutes. So going to sleep with music, even if it's soft music, if your brain has to be switched on so that it can engage in that music, so that it can actually recognize the music. If you can recognize it as music, you can recognize it as different words, different sounds, different harmonies, melodies, instruments, whatever. If your brain can recognize that, it means that the parts of your brain for recognizing that are on, and they need to be switched off in order for us to get a restful sleep. So you can listen to music up to a certain time to kind of calm down and get into that relaxed mode, ready for sleep, but then it needs to go off so that your brain can shut down, not be listening or recognizing any recognizable sounds and recognizable music, so it can be switching off and it can allow the deep sleep to happen. Now, one thing that I would say is white noise. White noise is different. White noise is like sounds of nature, or they're sort of like sounds which are continuous, but they do not stimulate the brain in the same way. In fact, they actually help us, they help our brains to get into that relaxed state so that we can sleep. So what is white noise? Well, white noise would be something like rain, or if you're lucky enough to live near or to be by the sea waves, that is a very relaxing sound for some people. And many of us, we've had the opportunity perhaps to go to the Caribbean or the West Indies or some other tropical place, Asia. And sometimes when it gets dark, it's like the volume just goes up, and there's these crickets and these other bugs that you don't even see, and they're making all this different noise. But for some people, that is white noise, and it actually helps them to have a better sleep. So white noise is okay. In fact, white noise is good. White noise is good. And for people who suffer with relaxing and falling to sleep, white noise actually can help. It's been proven to help many people, both adults and children, especially babies that sometimes get fractious during sleep time because they're trying to like just fight the sleep. White noise often helps. So if you feel that you must listen to something or you must have some kind of noise on, then white noise is fine. But other than that, you know, reading or having lights on from whatever consoles or the actual light itself and music is not going to help you actually to get a good sleep. And finally, there's one thing that I've missed off this list. There are some essential oils that are great for sleep. Lavender is one of them. Lavender is absolutely great for relaxation and sleep. You will find this in aromatherapy sections in any shop. And whether it's lavender oils that you put in a diffuser, or whether they are lavender bath salts or candles. I wouldn't advise that you put a lavender candle on before you go to sleep, because you may find your house is not the same as it was before you went to sleep, if you get what I mean. So perhaps not a candle, but other lavender things. These really help to induce sleep. Chamomile and others, they're really good natural herbs and natural substances that can help induce sleep. Valerian, that is a natural thing that can help induce sleep as well, which we can take orally. That is nitol, so that's something else as well. So these are things that you can consider. But other than that, have a routine for sleeping and waking. Have a bedtime. Say, you know what, it's 10:30, it's 10, it's whatever, 9:30. And this is something I'm saying to myself as well, and just say, this is my set routine. And before I get to the bedtime, I'm going to start to, you know, relax. I'm going to start turning the bright lights off and put the dimmer ones on. I'm going to turn the loud noises off and replace them for quieter ones. I'm getting myself into a mode of relaxation and sleep before I actually turn everything off and go to sleep. So have a routine for sleep and have a wake up time. Get up at whatever time you're going to get up, 6, 7, whatever it is. But try to stick to it as much as possible. And I know it's hard. I'm only telling you what is the best. You have to sort of try to incorporate this into your own routines. But, you know, try as much as possible if you want to get the best out of your sleep and to have the most restful sleep. And as I said before, as I alluded to just before, having soothing music, reading something of a spiritual content, and certainly prayer before bed. These are amazing things to help us to be relaxed, to leave the cares of the day behind before switching off and going to sleep. And effective stress management is absolutely important, and it's absolutely paramount for this, because stressed people, and many of us are, we don't sleep very well. And so we must have an effective stress management strategy to help us so that we can get the rest and the sleep that we need. And actually, many of the things that I've said, for example, exercise, for example, the essential oils, for example, exposure to daylight for 30 minutes a day, or a light box, trying to gain more of a routine, and certainly, you know, using our spiritual resources, whether it's prayer, whether it's you know, reading the Bible, or other positive and encouraging and enlightening books and things. All of these things actually help with stress management, and therefore will help with relaxation, and therefore should help with sleep. So these are the sleep aids. I'm not sure how many I've shared. I think probably about 10 or 11, but try to remember these things and put these things in practice. It's not easy, but like everything else, it requires determination, and it requires prioritization, because one thing that I've come to understand is we do the things that we prioritize. If we don't prioritize it, it doesn't get done if you're busy generally. And so be kind to yourself and prioritize your sleep, prioritize your rest. And finally, I would just like to end with this bit of encouragement. And again, it's taken from my favorite book, which is the Bible. And it says, "I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makes me dwell in safety." And so I hope that you guys also, and myself, that we can lie down and sleep in peace tonight and all the nights that we bless with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow.
Okay, as always, wonderful, Judith. Thank you so much for that presentation. And I'm sure, as everybody has heard, it's not only encouragement to do the right thing, but also some sound scientific and real world understanding of why we are benefited in these ways, the times that we should be sleeping, the things that we can be eating, and the things that we can do to try and assist ourselves. So thank you very much, Dr. Judith. We haven't got a huge amount of time, but we've got a little bit of time left. So I can see a hand going up already for questions. Marcella, I'm going to come to you. If you could just hang on just for a moment or two. I just want to make a very quick announcement. And I know that we had a question in the chat as well. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Judith. One thing I'm going to say, first of all, you know that we usually have a prize for participants. I'm going to ask, a bit of a strange one, if anybody is brave enough, we're going to actually give away 3 prizes this week. Okay, we're blowing the budget because it's the last one of this series. So if I could have 3 people who either are brave enough to say that they are having challenges with sleeping, or they know of somebody who is having a challenge sleeping, if you could unmute and let me know now.
I'm having problems.
If you're brave enough.
I'm having problems sleeping.
Okay.
Me too.
Janet.
So
Janet.
we've got Janet, and
Wow.
oh, I don't know if this was the right way to do this. So okay, we had Janet. Anybody else? Is that
I said Yvette.
Can I say? Is that Yvette? Okay. And I saw a hand go up first, which I think was it Selena. Is that you, Selena?
Yeah.
Hello. All right, we're going to take Janet, Yvette, and Selena. Okay, and apologies, we can't deal with everybody. But what I would say is this evening's prize. Oh, can I get it? This evening's prize is, I need to grab this from the screen. Bear with me a second. Okay. If you'll just give me 1 second. I said to somebody yesterday, you would have thought after a year of being on Zoom for work and various other things, I would have this locked by now. Right, so this is a machine which will actually create white noise. Can anyone remember what the benefits of what were some of the examples for white noise? Can anyone remember? What are some of the examples? What kinds of things might it have been?
Crickets.
The sea.
Could have been cricket. Excellent. Selena, it was what? Sorry.
The C.
Hello. There
Can
could have
you
been the
hear me?
C. Yep. Anything else? Yes, I can. It was the C. You said the C. Okay,
Yeah.
rain. Excellent.
Right.
So
Oh,
effectively, this machine will create white noise. So it's something that can be used. If someone's trying to sleep, you can place this on, put this machine on, and it will generate white noise. I think Dr. Judith explained that we don't want noise that that your mind will recognize as music and something that it's trying to interpret. So that wonderful machine will actually create white noise, something that will be soothing in the background, that your mind won't be trying to process, but will assist you to get to sleep. So that's the first prize that will be received. And the second prize, which I can't find at the moment, you'll have to forgive me, Judith. The second prize is actually, oh, bear with me. No, it's not coming up. The second prize is actually, oh, can we see that there?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is lavender, okay? So it's some aromatherapy oils with lavender within them and other essential oils, which again, used in the right context, whether it's placed in the bedroom or in an area where you're going to be sleeping. So we will be sending out that lavender oil and the white noise generator to those three people. So Janet, Yvette, and Selena. So the machine that we're going to get you the name of that machine, Ingrid. Okay, so we'll put the name of that machine in the chat. So if anybody wants to get hold of it, they can do so. But if those three people, Janet, Yvette, and Selena, if you can message us in the chat, message me directly with either your telephone number or your address, and then we'll make sure that those two things are shipped out to the three of you sometime over the next week. So congratulations. Right, a couple of questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. So we had one which you may have answered by now, Judith. It was one about some tips for someone whose, I think, granddaughter wakes them up during the night. Granddaughter comes over. This is Janet's question. Granddaughter stays over, wakes up in the middle of the night, sometimes at 1 or 2 a.m. After that, Janet, she's saying she's routinely waking up every morning. I'm assuming there's kind of like a habit that's been formed here. Are there any other tips for insomnia? One thing I was going to ask just before you answer that, Judith, is temperature an issue? Is there something about the balance of temperature? Because I know for myself, if I'm too cold or too hot, I don't seem to sleep very well. And are there any other tips that you might want to bring on for insomnia? And then we'll go to Marcella for Marcella's question.
Okay, yeah. So temperature control is important, and they also, I think it says in the slide, I'm not sure if it does or not, that you want to be in a cool room, because often being in a hot room actually it inhibits the quality of the sleep. So they advise that your room is cool. That's difficult if you live perhaps in a tropical country, but we live in England. So that's probably not such a problem at this time of the year, but can be in the summer. So having a fan or something like that would be fine. And the noise of a fan is white noise, so you don't have to be thinking, oh, that's going to stop my brain from doing what it does, from shutting down, should I say. So sleep in a cool room is better. And if you find that actually for sleep in a cool room, I'm going to be too cold, then having a nice, one of the heavy togs of a duvet, you know, like the 12 or the 15 one, especially in winter, that you at least be all cozy and warm in bed, but the room itself will be cool. So that's to do with temperature. So going back to the question about the granddaughter and the insomnia. So I think for you, Janet, one of the things that would be very important is to try to encourage that granddaughter to have a peaceful sleep, so that perhaps she doesn't get up. So I'm not sure how old she is, but applying as many of those principles that we talked about to the granddaughter, so hopefully she can sleep through the night if she's of an age that she sleeps through the night. If it's a little tiny baby, then obviously that's different, because they often, you know, they wake up for feeds and this, that, and the other. And actually the white noise machine, so if you go onto Amazon, any of you who are out there, if you go onto Amazon and you put in white noise machines, then you'll find loads of different ones. You know, there's so many. There's some really, really super expensive ones. There's some cheaper ones. You can get white noise machines, and they're often used for babies to help them to combat this fractiousness that they often have, so that they can actually get a good sleep. But anyone can use them. So applying the principles that I mentioned to the granddaughter is one of the things, but also for you to apply them to yourself as well. So the dark room, going to bed early, not eating a lot of food before you go to bed, and making sure that you get exercise during the day, making sure that you're subjecting yourself to enough sunlight, making sure you're eating the right things, all of these things. And, you know, if we're being honest, there's probably no one on this call who does them all. I know I don't. I wish I could say to you that I do. And I guess that's what I'm working towards, but, you know, I don't. So those are the things, all of those sleep aids that I shared in the talk, those are the things that you want to try to do to combat insomnia. I would try to avoid sleeping tablets because they can really mess up the system, and they can be very, very, very addictive. They are benzodiazepines, many of them. They can be very addictive. But what I didn't mention is, you know, oh, well, I did mention it actually, things like valerian, you can try, nitol, that's a natural thing that you can take. Obviously check the information on the tub if you are going to take that, on the bottle if you are going to take that, so that you do not have any of the contraindications to taking valerian, but you can try that.
Okay, thank you very much, Judy. Hopefully that answers your question, Janet, and any others who might have had similar problems. Marcella, I know you've been waiting very patiently.
Thanks,
what's your comment or question?
Thank you so much, Dr. Judith. That was really helpful. It's my worst thing to combat. And I just wanted one quick question. You mentioned that I've looked at SAD machines already, and you said if it's 20,000 for half an hour, but the ones I've seen that are more reasonable, more affordable, they're actually 10,000. Is that not powerful enough?
Well, I am more familiar with the use of SAD boxes in the situation of depression and the problems that people have with sleep in the context of depression, but they do advise 20,000. But if all you can afford is 10, then you can go ahead with that, but you might need to use it a little bit longer. But the instructions in the manual will tell you how long you need to use it for, because one thing is, you know, everything needs to be balanced, and you don't want to be sat in front of one of those things for too long, because actually too much serotonin production, which is going to cause serotonin to be produced in your brain, too much serotonin production can cause a rebound headache. So you can have the 10,000 lux machine, but follow the instructions that are in the manual and use it that way.
Yeah, and if it is for winter depression, you'd rather advise 20 would be better.
Yeah, that's what I'm more familiar with. But, you know, at the end of the day, if we're just being real and honest, you know, you have to pay for this, don't you? And you've got to be within your budget, so you have to do what you can. Yeah.
Can I ask one more very quick thing, but it's quite important?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You know, you said not to have sugar before bed, like cakes and that kind of sugar. I know loads of people that think, because I can't go to bed hungry, it's really difficult for me, I can't sleep. And if you have to eat something before you go to bed, many people think eat fruits, but they're sugar as well. Is that a different sugar? What's the best thing basically to eat if you have to have something?
So I guess you don't want that insulin surge. So if you eat a load of fruit and fruit is wonderful, but you want to be eating it a bit earlier on, you probably want to eat something that is probably not a sweet thing. So have salad, I guess, have spinach, have broccoli, have something which has got less simple sugars in. Or a very long-acting carbohydrate, so some I don't know, oats. Oats actually contain quite a lot of melatonin. There's food, I didn't really talk about that, but there's food that contain melatonin, which oats is. But really the presence of food in the stomach at night is not going to give you a great sleep. So what I'm saying is not really ideal. Perhaps maybe just pushing back the time when you have that meal a little bit, you know. So if you're used to eating, say you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, you know, and you're having your last meal at 8, try to push it back to 7 perhaps, so that you're not hungry at 10 o'clock. And then once you've done it for 7 o'clock, then maybe try and push it back to 6:30, so that you're getting to, you know, you're slowly kind of pushing yourself to that stage where actually it becomes a normal habit for me to eat the last meal a bit earlier so that I can get a better sleep.
It's about developing routine, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And you can change your routines, and all of us on this call, I'm sure all of us have got bad habits, but we can, the good news is that we can change them. And we can encourage each other to change them.
Thank you so much.
I think no problem. I think thanks for that. You know, really pertinent questions, Marcel, and great answers as always, Doctor. I think some of this, as we're saying about changing habits, for a lot of us, you know, we might have been going to bed, and I know even as a young child, you might say, okay, we're going to have a hot chocolate and a couple of biscuits to go to bed, you know, and these are habits, and then a lot of us think, oh, that's great, but actually understanding some of the science of what that's doing to us will help us to make informed decisions, you know. So now that we understand that actually that sugar rush just before I'm going to bed is going to affect my cycle, then okay, that's the reason why we now maybe need to be thinking about something else to drink and something else to eat before going to bed. So I think as many people say, knowledge is power, you know, so by having this information, we're hoping for us all, and Judith says it many times, I know it's definitely a battle for me about what I'm eating and when I'm sleeping, but we are encouraging you, we're encouraging each other to do as best as we can. I know that we're out of time. If there is another burning question, then please shout out now. But if not, just a couple of very quick announcements and a couple more announcements. Effectively, this is the end of our current Better Health series. So this is the second series that we've run. Both this series and the first series, they are available on our YouTube channel. So that can be found at Inspired Steps CIC. So if you type that into YouTube, all of the videos from this session, this series, and the previous series will be on there. So that's Inspired Steps CIC. We are actually going to be having a 1-week break. So next week we're having a 1-week break, but we're going to have a very short final series. So series 3, we'll be looking at positive mental attitude. We're going to be considering some of the issues of depression without going too deeply, but we're going to be looking at what are some of the principles, what are some of the tips, how can we promote positive mental attitudes and positive perspectives in terms of encouraging good mental health. So that's going to be a short 2-week session, which Dr. Judith, you'll be doing the first one for us on the 18th. And can you remind me, I know I should know this, what's the overall title of that presentation?
So it's going to basically, in essence, it's going to be about how we can use our lifestyle to help prevent and manage depression. So how we can use correct living principles of how we can avoid depression, and if we have got depression, how we can help to manage it and decrease it and get rid of it through how we live.
Excellent. And our second session in that on the 25th of March, some of you may remember we had Mark Semple, who came, the counsellor who was with us a couple of weeks ago. All being well, he'll be here for the final session on the 25th of March. Again, we'll be looking, and we want it to be quite positive. So what we're going to be doing is to be hopefully encouraging good practices in challenging depression and those issues. So we're going to have a 1 week's break next week, the 11th, just to catch our breath. Then we'll be going again on the 18th and 25th. with these 2 sessions on positive mental health and trying to challenge depression. Thereafter, you'll be able to use exactly the same number that you've been using to come onto these sessions as well. So use the same login, use the same password, and you'll be able to engage. It will be the same time, 7 till 8:30. Thereafter, from the beginning of April, if you remember, those who are on the line, we had a very interesting exercise taster session last week, which I think for those of us who joined in, it was really good, really encouraging. So we're going to then be running a series of exercise sessions. They'll be free of charge in the first instance. We will have a program of around about 6 to 8 weeks, because what we want to do is try and help build a habit. It's great doing something as a one-off, but I think for most of us, we need to build good habits. So we're going to be running these exercise sessions from same time. We may have 2 sessions. The first like a beginners or intermediary session, which might be more chair-based and more gentle, and then we may have a slightly more advanced one afterwards. So for argument's sake, 7 to 7:30 would be the beginners and intermediary session, and then maybe people can stay on for the second one, or if people want to join for the more advanced one from 7:30 to 8, that's what we're planning to do. And that will start, all being well, from Thursday, the 1st of April. Okay, and we'll be running that for 6 to 8 weeks, again, all being well. So I know I've fired a lot of information across at you there. Please keep a look on our Facebook, which is Inspired Steps CIC. So we'll be placing information on there of future events. Our website, which is inspiredsteps.co.uk. And as I've said, we have videos on our YouTube channel, Inspired Steps CIC. So thank you all very much for your participation. Janet, Yvette, Selena, we have your details, so we'll be getting those awards out to you. Our winners from last week, I think, Michelle, I did put something in the chat, so if you can either hang on or just jot your details back for me in the chat, Michelle. So your telephone number would be really useful, and I'll be in contact with you about last week's prizes. There's just been a delay getting those out. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for staying with us for this second series of our Better Health sessions. We hope that you'll be back again in a fortnight's time for our next, our third installment of these Better Health sessions. And again, I'm sure you'd all agree, we thank Dr. Judith for her sterling contributions throughout this series, and we'll be certainly drawing on her experience once again. So we wish you all a good night. Rest well. Are we in time? So we all should be in bed within the next hour, Dr. Judith?
Yes.
Do you think so?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the challenge is on. We've all got to be doing our washing, getting the washing up done, getting the pillows fluffed up, and in bed within an hour to an hour and a half. So thank you all once again. We wish you all a good night, and hopefully we'll see you in a fortnight's time. You take care.
Thank you very much. Good night, all. Bye. Thank you very much.
Okay.